my Memorial Day, and he is, if you don't know, David is the creator of the kid show Diners, Drives, and Dives with Guy Fieri. Guy still hosts that, right, Dave?
Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
I peeled off after season 11, but he hung in there.
And also, we have to mention your really interesting book, Food Americana, which you're going to talk about. And, this is summertime is officially starting as of today. So everybody's into, barbecuing and hamburgers and apple pie and all these wonderful American foods that there's a history about. Lobster rolls, I think, mention that too, which is a great summer food. So let's have some fun and talk about that today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, by the way,
Thank
Maria.
you, David. Thanks for being here. So I know this book, Food Americana, sounds really interesting. So tell us about, I guess let's start with the hamburger. What's going on with that? I know you have some.
Well, a hamburger has become a multifaceted item. You can get any kind of hamburger now. The basic burger, the burger that's smashed on the grill. I mean, there's obviously a chain called Smash Burger that makes them that way.
Yes.
And increasingly, the hamburger has become a go-to item and more expensive at white tablecloth restaurants. You can't run an upscale place serving lunch to business people without having a $28 hamburger on the menu. In the book, I actually go back into the history of some of that, and I talked to Daniel Boulud, who is the multi-Michelin starred, internationally famous chef, who actually created an iconic burger that led many, many other expensive restaurants to put a burger of their own on the menu. It was back in, I think, the 90s, I'd have to check my own book, but early 90s, that there was a controversy in France over the fact that McDonald's had opened up and was spreading throughout the country. And in one particular small French town, they set fire to the McDonald's. Daniel Boulud, being French, was deeply offended by that. In his view, why can't you have a McDonald's? And it spurred him, he told me, to think about what a French hamburger would be. What's the burger that you would enjoy with red wine? And he created a burger of the outside of it, of course, is ground beef, but inside, he stuffed the burger with braised beef, short ribs, which is a French specialty, and foie gras. And then he topped it with a homemade tomato compote, and it was on a special bun. And when you cut it open, it's like having a turducken. You see the various different layers. Is still selling it at multiple restaurants around the world today.
Wow. So that's sold around the world then, not just in France.
Oh, absolutely. Well, he's got restaurants all around the world, so he sells it in New York, and I believe. Now I'm gonna mess it up. I was gonna say Singapore. It may be Singapore, and elsewhere. And it's kind of the over the top model for a super duper burger.
Yes. Well, I know in Italy there was a commotion when McDonald's.
Yeah, look. The fact of the matter is, McDonald's is what it is, even though they do change their menu depending upon the country they're in. But they're seen as, unfortunately, something American. Just as when we send what we've done to pizza back to the rest of the world, and when I say that, there's phenomenal pizza in America. There's been a renaissance in artisanal pizza. But the chains like Domino's and Pizza Hut, they are what they are. But when they open up, and most of their expansion is now being done internationally, because let's face it, where else are you going to go in America? They are seen as American food. They're not seen as Italian food. They're seen as a particularly American experience. And despite many people overseas telling you they look down their nose at America, there is still something about pizza, burgers, and jeans
Yeah.
that is attractive in many other
Yes, well,
countries.
when I'm in Italy, it's funny that you say that. So if you go to a McDonald's there, and I've gone for because they have cappuccino, if you want a quick
Mm,
cappuccino, and it's also a novelty because they're set up. Some of them are actually quite interesting. The first one in the center of Rome is interesting, but I was just going to say it seems to be like a tourist attraction for people in Rome if they want that American experience. So yes, even though they do, and I'm not here or there for McDonald's. I'm just saying, it's just always overwhelmed with people. It's kind of like a tourist attraction, and especially for people that might not have come to the United States, I think they feel like, well, I'm going to get the American experience, so.
when I lived in Budapest in '89, they had just opened a McDonald's, and it was the busiest place in town. Now, a lot of that is because you couldn't have it before. In other words,
Yes.
I remember when I was going to college in Oklahoma, Coors beer was not sold in the East. You could get it in Oklahoma, and when I would bring it back to New York, people would go nuts. Now, Coors is a crappy beer, but because you couldn't get it, it was something to be. It's like In-N-Out Burger, which happens to be a good hamburger, but there's a legend around In-N-Out Burger because people cannot get it in the eastern part of the country. And if you go to LA, you got to have an In-N-Out Burger. And by the way, I'm one of those who does, but it's absence makes the heart grow fonder.
Exactly. So tell us about some of the other interesting, like, the history of some of this Americana food. Because as I was mentioning to you, I'm always telling people we do have, my specialty is Italian food and the history of that. But America, as you know so well, because you did this wonderful book on it, America does have history to some of their interesting foods. So
Which I go into in great detail, but let's start with your specialty, pizza.
Yes.
In southern Italy at the time that migration began to the United States, the people coming here were dirt poor. And at home, pizza was a low cost dish. It was extremely simple, topped with tomatoes. And if you had an extra buck or two, you could top it with a piece of lard or perhaps a sardine. Now, arrive in the United States, find this bounty of food that, by comparison, was immense, that was available to people who were poor, especially including meat, which, if you lived in southern Italy and you were poor, you didn't have meat. In the United States, it was possible to have meat, so that ended up on top of pizzas. But the pizzas themselves differed because of the reality of the situation. First of all, the incredible mozzarella from Italy would not survive a boat trip. So it had to be replaced with an American version of it, which at the time was not as good. But more importantly, to how the pizza developed, the wheat available in the United States was much higher in protein than the wheat that was grown in Italy. And the ovens here were gas fueled compared to the ovens in Italy, which were wood fired. Put those two factors together, and there's no way that you can get the crust you used to get in Italy. What you got here was crispier, crunchier, the kind of crust Americans have grown to adore because it's the only thing they were first offered. That's right off the bat. We imported a food from another country, and by necessity, we changed it. We do that with so many different foods. I argue in the book, for example, that sushi is now an American dish. The number 2 or 3 executive at the company that produces the most prepackaged sushi in the United States told me she believes that when she was younger, she and her friends running out from high school to grab a lunch would grab a burger. Today, her kids, when they do the same thing, pick up sushi. Now, again, in many, well, in most cases, the sushi that is popular here is not sushi as sold in Japan, which tends to be simpler. The rolls are, if maki is one form of sushi, it's rolls. Compared to the Americanized roll, which is the size of a Buick, uh, we have we now fill sushi with things like steak and French fries. We deep fry sushi,
Oh, yes.
which I in the book I talk about a gas station with a sushi bar in Oklahoma
Uh,
with great sushi, but most of what they sell to the crowd out there
uh-huh.
is deep fried. There are places that produce sushi with fried chicken on the inside. We've taken this dish and we've made ourselves comfortable with it. We certainly did that with Chinese food.
Yes.
Although what you're seeing interestingly with Chinese food now and with other cuisines
Yeah.
is that the weight and balance of immigration is such that there is now enough of a native Chinese population in the United States for Chinese restaurants to begin catering to them, not the non-Chinese majority of the US. So you're seeing for the first time, and it's been happening for a number of years, you're seeing the kind of food that is actually eaten in China, some of which would be familiar to most Americans because there's a lot of dumplings, there's a lot of noodles. But I was taken to this massive food court in Flushing, Queens, in New York, an area that I was born in Flushing. At the time, it was Jewish and Italian.
Uh-huh.
Now it's all Asian, mostly Chinese. And this was before the pandemic, but I'm certain that they've reopened. It
Yeah.
was a massive hall with stand after stand after stand of people fresh making in front of you food as eaten in China. One amazing dish called dry pot, where you kind of pick your ingredients, sort of like a Chipotle,
Uh-huh.
and it comes back mixed in a bowl, spicy as can be. But the difference is that it contains ingredients most Americans would turn their noses up at, like tendon or tripe or artery or duck blood. And if you just stretch your envelope a little bit, the food's incredible. I was taken there by a couple of young Chinese, a couple who were or had been students when they first came to the United States. One of them's like a physicist, and they were pointing out the things I should try, and it was just remarkable. And you're seeing on a much smaller basis, you're seeing something similar in Mexican food now,
Uh-huh.
where all of American Mexican food came from the food of the norteños, the people in the north of Mexico, who, after the Mexican American War, to their shock and I presume horror, the border was redrawn and they were no longer living in Mexico. Now they were living in the United States. But it was their particular evolved as Mexican American with all the changes that are employed with any new cuisine. These days, Mexico, like most countries, has regional cuisines, and they're all somewhat different. These days, given increasing immigration from other parts of Mexico, we're now seeing foods that had not traditionally been part of the Mexican American menu, such as mole, that incredible sauce based on chilies, often with the inclusion of Mexican chocolate, that is served on many things, but most traditionally on chicken. Or actually, if you go back to Mexico eons ago, it would have been on turkey. But mole on chicken is just phenomenal. And the latest Mexican regional food that is really taken off across the U.S. is something called birria de res. Birria is stewed meat, uh, often served, originally served as goat in central Mexico, but birria de res is birria made of beef. And starting in Southern California a few years back, birria de res tacos, in which the beef is put on top of a tortilla, The tortilla is flipped over, it's put on the grill, it's braised on both sides, grilled on both sides, pardon me, and then it is served with a cup of the original cooking liquid, which is now called consomme, into which, like a French dip sandwich, you dip the taco. It is phenomenal.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Oh, it's great,
That's
just
really
great.
interesting. What I wanted to have you touch upon, because it's barbecue and grilling season officially, and I know you were telling me some really interesting things about barbecuing and grilling. It's like a real big trend now, you were saying, and some other trends happening. So tell us.
Well, what's happening with barbecue, which is not grilling, which we'll
Uh-huh.
explain in a second,
Yes, two different
is
things.
that barbecue for eons had been a highly regional thing in the United States. But barbecue, the name is believed to come from a Taino native word. That was a tribe that was found in the Caribbean
Uh-huh.
for the way they cooked things. They would have four sticks and then a frame on top of it over coals. And this was first seen by explorers coming to the New World, originally Spanish. So they, pardon me, I'm getting choked up about barbecue. They they transformed the native word into barbacoa, which then Englishified to barbecue. By definition, barbecue became in America the low and slow cooking of originally a whole animal over indirect heat from coals. Now, over time, it modified in a billion ways. For one thing, when the meatpacking industry figured out how to sell beef in parts as opposed to whole cows or sides of cows, it allowed different barbecue genres to focus on different pieces of the animal. Originally, you took a whole whatever and cooked it. Uh, Different forms of barbecue then were invented in different places. The tangy sauces of the Carolinas, and in the Carolinas there are different variations of those sauces. The sweet barbecue of Kansas City or St. Louis, the beef barbecue of Central Texas, which was generally brisket and sausage. And you used to look forward to going to a particular place. You know, if you wanted Memphis ribs, you went to Memphis. Well, a fascinating thing has happened over the past few years, and you can consider it good or bad depending upon your point of view. But all of those styles have now migrated. And there's an article in Texas Monthly right now about whether or not the Texas style brisket being made in North Carolina is good. But you got places like Smoke in Chicago where the owner traveled around the country, sampled different kinds of barbecue, and offers most of them in one place. So the good news is if you're not going to Memphis, you can probably get Memphis ribs in Utah.
Yes.
The bad news, if you're a purist, is that they're probably not going to be quite as good as they would have been in Memphis. We're seeing a lot of that kind of homogenization of regional foods of all kinds. I mean, you get a lobster roll anywhere now.
Yes.
I grew up in Western Massachusetts, and in the summer, we would go to Maine, and you looked forward to getting lobster in Maine. And it can be perfect there because you literally can eat it on a wharf where the boats come in and they haven't been shipped anywhere. But the lobster roll is now a national dish to a great extent because of a chef named Rebecca Charles who put them on the menu at a restaurant she owned in New York because she was looking for she had to fill out this menu of sandwiches. She needed another sandwich. She had lived in Maine, so she added the lobster roll. It was there, not in Maine, that the media picked up on this wacky sandwich
Uh-huh.
and publicized it. And now there are lobster roll franchises literally from coast to coast. And of course, a lobster roll is a wonderful summer dish.
Yeah, oh, it is
Wonderful
great.
summer
So
dish.
tell us now about grilling. I know my favorite thing to do is grilling. I love grilling vegetables and shrimp and corn, and even sometimes fruits. So tell us, I know you were telling us the difference between the barbecue.
Well, this isn't always true. Barbecue is what it is
Uh,
unless it isn't.
right,
But barbecue supposedly is low and slow over indirect heat.
right.
Grilling is fast and hot and right over the coals.
Mhm.
And somehow we've come to call backyard grilling barbecuing.
Yes,
It's not. But there's not, I mean, big deal. There's nothing better than a hamburger and some hot dogs and some vegetables
yes,
on the grill, seared, flipped, and the juice should be running down your chin. What people don't realize about grilling is you can grill almost anything.
yes,
Vegetables are a perfectly good example. There's the standard suspects, hot dogs, hamburgers, sausages. You can grill lobster tails.
yes.
And they're wonderful. You can grill fish, and you should.
Oh,
The one thing with grilling is you really have to watch for flare-ups. If you walk away from the grill and the fat drips onto the coals or onto the gas jet, now all of a sudden you're enjoying blackened something when that may not have been part of the
of
recipe.
what you're doing, yes.
Yeah. You're talking about summer foods. I haven't mentioned there's a real renaissance now in ice cream.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, there's been a real serious move toward artisanal ice cream. And let me back up.
Yeah,
When you hear homemade ice cream at some place down the street from you, let's be honest,
yeah,
the mix, the base, the milk and cream that they're using probably came in a bag
yeah,
because it had to be pasteurized.
yeah.
The question then becomes, what do you do with that ice cream to make it something special? What do you do in terms of mix-ins, swirls, syrups, flavors? And there's been a real big move toward savory ice creams these days. There's a place I live on a Long Beach Island, New Jersey, which is a tourist destination in the
Yes.
summer. And our local handmade ice cream place has turned out lobster ice cream for a particular restaurant wanted it. Haven't had it, but it sounds interesting.
Uh-huh.
There's a small chain, I was going to say on the West Coast, but they're now open in Miami,
Right.
called Salt and Straw, that approaches ice cream completely from an haute cuisine fashion and makes incredibly complicated. The owner told me the number of ingredients is limited only by the number of hands they can get around the ice cream machine to put stuff in. But he also hand makes all of the ingredients, which is, to me, when someone says they're artisanal ice cream,
Uh-huh.
if they're making their own ingredients, because a fudge brownie as made to eat as a fudge brownie doesn't perform well in ice cream because the temperature and being surrounded by a form of liquid turns the brownie into. At Salt and Straw, they figured out how to make a brownie specifically to put in ice cream, and their stuff's incredible. They started in Portland, they worked their way down the West Coast. Now they're either open or about to open in Miami. The pandemic kind of messed with their plans. But the thing about ice cream is it covers everything. You can get the cheap industrial gallon of vanilla at the supermarket. Then you can work your way up through various levels. I mean, look, the quality of ice cream generally is measured by the degree of butterfat. The more butterfat, the creamier, richer the ice cream feels until you get to about 18%. When you get over 18%, it starts to feel oily.
Yes.
But you can get anything along those lines. And I'm not endorsing this, I'm just mentioning it. The new thing in ice cream is benefits. Ice cream with benefits.
Yes.
You can get ice cream with probiotics.
Yes.
You can
Yes.
get ice cream with vegetables hidden inside it in the premise that you'll get your kids to eat something healthy. There's even an ice cream that claims if you eat it before bed, it won't keep you up. Now, I did not know that ice cream before bed would keep you up, but it's called
My
nightshade. And
favorite way to make ice cream, because I'm doing this plant-based stuff now,
yeah,
just get overly mature bananas and you whip them, and it's just unbelievable. You freeze it, you can put in whatever ingredients you want, and you probably can do, kale and whatever else you want to, but yes, that is, it's really interesting. But so people can also enjoy some artisan ice cream for their summer. Then that's really interesting. I know in Italy they were doing an ice cream with Parmesan, the milk that was used for
ooh,
Parmigiano Reggiano cheese.
think about that, because like salted caramel is a terrific flavor because it balances sweet and salt.
Oh yeah,
The
oh that
Parmesan would be. I had some phenomenal Parmesan the other day. Ooh, I was making. I just learned incredibly how to make cacio e pepe,
uh
and I didn't have Padano, so I used Parmesan from. We have a
right,
very good local cheese store.
yes.
I'm going to live on that for the rest of my
Well,
life.
cacio and pepe, the real cacio and pepe is made with pecorino.
But that's it. I said Padano.
Pecorino,
Yes,
yes,
yeah.
and that is not that easy to find here. The real pecorino from Abruzzo, which is where that dish comes from also, although they do it in Rome, it's like a big
Well,
specialty in
they
Rome.
claim it's Roman, but okay.
Sometimes you can find that pecorino from the Roman.
Yeah, I not on a small barrier island with one cheese store.
Yes, yes. Well, yeah, you can find that, but yeah, cacio and pepe, that
What
is,
a dish!
yes,
But it's post-pandemic.
yes,
My wife and I are vaccinated. Our friends are vaccinated. For the first time in a year,
uh-huh,
we went to their house, someone else's house, to
uh-huh.
have a meal, and he made cacio and pepe.
Oh,
And
wow.
I incredibly had never made it.
Yes,
And I stood over his shoulder, and then he gave me the printed out directions he was using. And my wife said, "Could we have it tomorrow?" So we've had it like 3 times in the 2 weeks
I
since we
couldn't
were at
take
his
you
house.
up on that. It's so incredible that it's such a simple dish with only a few ingredients, but it's just such an incredible dish to eat. And it was so funny when all the restaurants in Italy started picking up on certain, because it's a very like a kind of a home based.
Yeah.
Now it's a gourmet thing all over the world. So people just, finally
Well,
discovered it. But yes, that's really delicious.
what
But
I
yeah, if you don't have pecorino, Parmigiano works too.
yeah, but I'd like to make it perfectly.
Yes.
The thing that it reminded me of was like almost everyone, I use pre-ground pepper, which is a
Uh-huh.
sin. But for the cacio e pepe, I ground the pepper and I toasted it.
Uh-huh.
And the difference between fresh ground and toast, well, first of all, when you toast any spice,
Yeah.
it's just something special. He said as he drove further down this very narrow rat hole about one Italian dish,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
oh, so good.
Yes, it is. It's amazing. David, thank you so much for sharing your Memorial Day with us and sharing all those interesting facts and information about everything. So now we can officially start our summer holiday. Thank you
Happy
so much.
summer.
So this is David Page, creator of Diners, Drives, and Dives, and your book, Food Americana. Where can people find that?
Amazon.com, Walmart.com, Target.com, Barnes and Noble. If they sell books, you'll find it there. And
Great, great.
thank you so much.
Thanks, David. And we'll be asking you to come back sometime in the future. Thank you.
Looking
Yeah.
forward to it.
Enjoy your Memorial Day. Thank you.
You too.